Chapter 26, Real Property and Land Use Control. Mostly real property is what we're talking about. So here's a definition of real property. Real property consists of land and everything permanently attached to it, including structures and other fixtures. It is immovable. Now remember, we talked about this earlier in the course. We distinguish real property from personal property. Personal property is defined as anything other than real property. And of course, personal property includes both tangible and intangible personal property. So land and structures are considered to be real property so long as the structures are permanently attached to the land, which brings up the question of what is a mobile home, and the answer to that depends upon whether or not the mobile home is permanently attached to the land or not. If it's permanently attached, it's probably real property. Otherwise, it's not. So as real property, it becomes part of the process of recording real property in the Superior Court Clerk's office, like we'll be talking about. If it's personal property, it's treated like a motor vehicle and has to have a motor vehicle registration. Land includes the soil and all natural and artificial structures. All waters contained on or under its surface, and much but not necessarily all of the airspace above it. It's a reasonable amount of airspace. Obviously, airplanes and air traffic have a right to go over the land, and that is not the landowner's property, but a reasonable amount of airspace is part of the real property. So as it says here, airspace rights, unless they are low and or frequent enough to interfere directly in the owner's enjoyment and use of that land, flights over private land do not violate the property rights. Okay. Subsurface rights include things like oil, anything else that might be in the subsurface, and those can be very valuable. Minerals and things like that, that belongs as part of the real property. As it says, minerals, oils, natural gas, etc. The owner has a right to this called a profit, to remove it from the land if he or she so chooses, and can also sell it. Plant life and vegetation are also included as part of the real property, including crops. So when you sell the land, if there's crops growing on it, the sale includes the crops unless it's otherwise specified in the contract. If the crops are sold by themselves, then they become personal property or goods, and they can be covered by the Uniform Commercial Code. A fixture, this is an important area. A fixture is an item that is affixed or attached to real property in a permanent way. So something can be a fixture at one point and not a fixture at another point. So for example, I like to use this example. If you are a renter and you buy a bookcase at IKEA and you put it against the wall, that's not a fixture, okay, because it's not permanently attached. However, if you buy something that you permanently attach to the wall, like you build in a bookshelf, then that becomes a fixture, and that's part of the real property. So for a tenant example, an example with a tenant, if it becomes part of the real property, it becomes the ownership of the owner of the property, not the tenant. And you can't take it with you when you leave without the owner's permission. An item can even sit on the land without being attached as long as the owner intends it to be a fixture. And fixtures are included in the sale of land. Typical fixtures are tile floors, etc. Okay. So when the courts have to determine whether something is a fixture or not, they examine the intention of the party who placed the object on the real property. When that intent is in dispute, the courts look and decide if the item is a fixture by whether or not these things are true. The property attached cannot be removed without causing substantial damage to the remaining realty. The property attached is so adapted to the rest of the realty as to have become part of it. So that's how that decision is made. Trade fixtures are personal property. A trade fixture is a personal property that is installed for a commercial purpose by a tenant. So that's in commercial property. And they remain the property of the tenant unless removal would irreparably damage the building or realty. So if you're renting a place to have an ice cream parlor and you have a freezer put in, that freezer belongs to property of the renter unless it would irreparably damage the building or realty. Okay, that ends part 1 of chapter 26.